The night Caleb Morgan turned 36, the last candle flickered atop a peach cobbler that no one would eat. The table was perfectly set, herb-roasted turkey still steaming, sourdough bread wrapped in a linen towel, and a bottle of chilled sangria sitting in the fridge like a forgotten promise. At 7:58 p.m., his phone buzzed. Lauren's name appeared, followed by 6 words that would tear through everything he thought was solid. "Don't wait up. I need to see someone. It's important." No explanation. No soft lie. No pretense. Just a blunt, emotionless text, like he was a stranger she barely owed courtesy. Caleb stared at the message, as if looking long enough might change what it said. But those 6 words stood firm, unapologetic, final. He typed a single reply. Understood. Not from strength. Not from wisdom. Just from the void. That hollow quiet that arrives when your heart breaks in slow motion. The food stayed untouched. The cobbler's candles melted into sticky puddles. She had promised to be home by 8, and like a fool, he believed her. He sat still in that moment, letting the silence settle over him like dust after a detonation. Then, without speaking a word, he walked into the bedroom and knelt beside the wooden chest at the foot of the bed, an old heirloom Lauren once said belonged to her grandmother. Blankets, keepsakes, and something else. A second phone, hidden beneath a scarf, tucked carelessly but not cleverly. He'd found it weeks ago but hadn't said anything. Back then, he told himself he was imagining things. That loving someone meant trusting them, not snooping. But now he had a reason. He powered it on. No password. That somehow hurt even more. The screen lit up instantly, almost eager. Messages flooded the screen. The contact name at the top, Shadow. Text after text painted a story he hadn't asked to read. Tonight, same place as always. Does your husband suspect? No. Caleb still thinks I'm his. His name, Caleb, felt like a punch when he read it. As if he were a clueless landlord being tricked into housing someone who no longer paid in loyalty or love. But it wasn't the betrayal that gutted him. It was the routine. The ease. This wasn't a mistake. This was habit. This was normal for her. And him? He was just background noise. Filler in a story that no longer featured him. He sat on the edge of their bed, that second phone still in his hand, his thoughts spinning while Burlington buzzed quietly beyond the windows. His world had just shifted off its axis, but the city moved on like nothing happened. Lauren wasn't home yet, but he knew, when she came back, she wouldn't return alone. Maybe not physically. But once you let the darkness in, it never comes empty-handed. At 2:13 a.m., the front door creaked open. Caleb hadn't gone to bed. He sat on the living room sofa, TV glowing without sound, the second phone resting cold in his hands. She walked in barefoot, smudged mascara, blouse wrinkled like it had been slept in somewhere else. She said nothing. No lie. No weak excuse. Just dropped her purse by the door and walked straight to the bathroom. He didn't move. He didn't speak. Water ran behind the closed door 10 minutes, maybe more. Each droplet hitting the tub like a metronome ticking toward a silence he didn't recognize anymore. When she emerged, she was wearing one of his old t-shirts, the soft gray one she always said smelled like home. The one she wore when she wanted forgiveness. She met his eyes and said, "Didn't think you'd still be up." He arched an eyebrow. "So I guess that makes 2 of us." She hovered there, caught in the fog of her own choices, and finally muttered, "I just needed space to think." Caleb gave a short, hollow laugh. Not cruel, just tired. "You thought so hard you left your wedding ring on the bathroom sink," he said, voice low. She didn't reply. "I saw the messages," he added. On the other phone. That cracked her armor. Her eyes, until now evasive, met his with something harder than guilt. Defeat. "It's not what it looks like," she whispered. "It looks like you planned a whole other life." Lauren walked to the dining table, picked up her regular phone, and unlocked it. She didn't show him anything, just stared for a second, then shut it off. "What now?" she asked. "You leave," Caleb said, steady. "I spoke with the landlord. Lease is in my name. You have until tomorrow to get your things." She didn't argue, didn't cry, just nodded once and walked toward the bedroom. He stayed on the sofa, surrounded by cold turkey, melted candles, and silence thick enough to taste. She never said goodbye. The next morning, he heard the wheels of a suitcase roll down the hallway. No requests. No glances back. Just absence. An hour later, the front desk buzzed. "Mr. Morgan? There's a man here asking for Ms. Lauren Bennett." "What's his name?" "Derek Callahan." His stomach twisted. "Tell him she doesn't live here anymore." "Yes, sir." He watched the security feed. Derek in sunglasses, scanning the windows, calling someone, then turning and walking away. Caleb exhaled, not with relief, but with finality. A door had closed, and he wasn't going to reopen it. That day, Caleb canceled all his meetings. The world could wait. His mind couldn't. He left the apartment and wandered through the quiet streets of Burlington, past the town square where they used to sip cider in the fall, past the storefronts where they once window shopped for furniture they never bought. He passed St. Paul's Church, where they lit a candle together that one Christmas, and then Maple Square Market, where she used to insist on buying peaches only if they smelled like summer. Every corner looked familiar, and every one felt like a lie. He wasn't sure where he was going until he arrived back home, his legs moving on muscle memory. The smell of cold turkey and spoiled cobbler still hung in the air, a ghost of the celebration that never happened. But somewhere in all that silence, something new stirred. Space. Not the kind that echoes with loss, but the kind that breeds possibility. Caleb stood in the middle of the kitchen and realized, for the first time in a long time, he wasn't waiting on someone to come home. And that was a start. 3 days passed. No texts, no calls, just silence, thick, still, and oddly peaceful, until the sound of keys at the door broke it. Lauren walked in as if the last 72 hours hadn't happened. No apology, no question, just a quick, rehearsed tone. I need to pick up a few things. Caleb was at the kitchen table, sorting project blueprints for a new client. He closed the folder without a rush. You've got 20 minutes. No begging, no drama. She went straight upstairs. Drawers opened and closed in a frenzy, heels, a handful of shirts, some paperwork. 18 minutes later, she was back in the living room with a backpack and a carry-on. But instead of leaving, she hovered, uncertain. Then, without invitation, she said, I didn't go to see Derek, at least, not for what you think. Caleb looked up, calm, clear-eyed. Then explain it, he said. No anger, no desperation, just the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing left to lose. Lauren hesitated, then sat in the same spot on the couch she used to claim every Sunday morning. He told me he changed, she began. Said he understood what we'd had. But when I got there, I realized he didn't want me. He wanted to use me, to get back at you. And when you said no, he kicked me out, she whispered. Caleb studied her, not with hatred, but with distance, as if he were looking at someone he used to know but couldn't quite place. So you came back here hoping what? That I'd open the door? That this place would still feel like yours? No, she said, lowering her head. I didn't know where else to go. The fire that once roared in his chest when she lied, betrayed, or gaslit him, it was gone. In its place? Ashes. You knew this would end, he said. You just didn't think I'd be the one to end it. She swallowed hard. I made mistakes, Caleb. No, he corrected. Mistakes are forgetting an anniversary or missing dinner. You made choices. You carved out time for a second life while sleeping beside me every night. The silence that followed was heavy, but not for him. She glanced around the apartment, now foreign to her. And then, as if changing the subject, said, Your mom called. Asked why you didn't show up for Sunday lunch. I told her you had work. Don't lie to her too, he replied. Lauren looked away. Are you going to tell her everything? I'm going to tell her the truth, he said. That I chose peace. She stood slowly, her expression blank. Is there someone else? No, Caleb said plainly. But not because I'm waiting for you. She gave a slow nod and walked out. And for a moment, Caleb thought that was the final page. He was wrong. 2 days later, he received a fraud alert from the bank. Someone tried to remotely access an old joint account they hadn't touched in over a year. He blocked it and called the bank to trace the attempt. An hour later, a new email landed in his inbox. No sender name, no subject, just a line of text. You're not as innocent as you pretend. We can both play dirty. But I swim deeper. No signature. But Caleb didn't need one. The voice behind those words was unmistakably hers. He didn't reply. Instead, he picked up the phone and called his attorney. Harper? It's time. Start the process. Full separation of assets. I'll send you everything, screenshots, emails, recordings. And the prenup. Because Lauren hadn't come back for forgiveness. She came back because Plan A had collapsed. And Caleb? He wasn't her backup plan. He was her final unlocked door. A week passed since Lauren left for the last time. Caleb believed the worst had passed. He had faced betrayal, deception, and a psychological ambush and survived. The silence that followed felt earned. A break earned not by victory, but by endurance. Until Tuesday came. Gray clouds lingered low over Burlington. A slow, soaking rain turned the sidewalks into mirrors. Caleb was at the office, reviewing renderings for a lakeside renovation when his assistant, Elise, knocked. Her face was pale. Caleb, this just came in. No return address. She handed him a thick envelope. He opened it still half thinking it might be another formality from the bank. But it wasn't. Inside was a printed complaint. Official. Stamped. Signed. A legal accusation filed under his name. Emotional and psychological abuse. Patterns of intimidation. A constant atmosphere of threat. Words designed to wound, not reflect truth. But on paper, they screamed like headlines. Caleb read it twice before his brain caught up with the facts. Lauren hadn't just left a mess. She'd come back with a match. Now, she was trying to burn down what was left of his life, not by yelling in the street or begging for attention, but by painting him as the villain in a story she wrote backwards. He called Harper Jennings, his attorney. She filed, Caleb said. Emotional abuse. I'm not surprised, Harper replied, her voice even. If this escalates, it could affect your license. But it's all false. I know. But the court doesn't deal in memory. It deals in evidence. We need to gather everything. Now. Caleb hung up and got to work. Screenshots. Voicemails. Email threads. Camera footage showing Lauren entering and exiting the building freely, laughing on calls, carrying flowers one afternoon. Nothing about her presence ever hinted at fear or danger. Then, he remembered the backup from the second phone. Old messages, dated and time-stamped. Her words. Her voice. Her control. Even an audio clip where Lauren said, half laughing, Caleb wouldn't hurt a fly. He's too soft to even raise his voice. He archived it all. Labeled it. Sent it to Harper that night. The next morning, the counterstrike came not in court, but in person. Lauren walked into his office unannounced. Dressed perfectly. Hair tied back. Expression clean, almost radiant. The kind of look someone wears to a press conference, not a confrontation. Elise tried to stop her, but she pushed past. Caleb didn't stand when she entered. What are you doing here? He asked flatly. She smiled like she just caught him off guard. Did you really think you were going to walk away as the hero? She asked. Because if you tell your side, I'll tell mine. And mine's more interesting. Yours is fiction, Caleb replied. A bad one. She stepped closer. It's a fiction with documents. And tears. People love a good victim story, Caleb. Especially when there's a calm, quiet man they can pin the blame on. He looked at her, unflinching. You came to threaten me? In my office? Elise saw you. The hallway cameras caught you. This visit? It just became part of the file. Her smile wavered. You're playing with fire. No, he said. You lit the match. I just opened the windows. For the first time, Lauren looked unsettled. Not defeated, but confused, like a magician watching their final trick fail in slow motion. Are you seeing someone else? She asked, just like before. Caleb shook his head. No, but I'm not with you. And that's all the difference I need. She blinked, turned, and walked out without closing the door behind her. That night, Harper called with an update. The counterclaim was filed. The evidence was strong: screenshots, digital trails, financial records. The judge agreed to fast-track review. Her false accusation could be dismissed or even flipped against her. She's trying to destroy you with emotion, Harper said. But we've got the facts. Just stay steady. And Caleb did. He walked that night through Green Hollow Park, the same place where he once knelt with a ring and a trembling hand. Now he walked without weight, without wondering what he could have done differently. Because the truth wasn't that he failed to hold on. It was that Lauren had let go long before he knew there was something to lose. The day of the hearing arrived without drama. No storm. No sirens. Just an eerie calm that wrapped around Burlington like the town itself was holding its breath. Caleb showed up at the courthouse at 8:45 a.m., dressed in quiet confidence. Navy jacket, no tie, polished boots. Harper Jennings walked beside him, her briefcase full, documents, photos, USBs, even the prenuptial agreement laminated for quick access. Caleb carried nothing but resolve. 15 minutes later, Lauren arrived. Beige suit, neatly tied hair, minimal jewelry. She looked less like a woman scorned and more like an actress stepping into a role she'd memorized too well. Her attorney was younger, slick hair, polished smile, carrying a briefcase that looked more decorative than functional. They didn't exchange greetings. There was no need. At exactly 9 a.m., the door opened and the judge, a woman in her 50s with a face like carved granite, called them in. This is not a stage, she began. Let's proceed. Lauren's attorney went first. He spoke in somber tones, painting Caleb as emotionally distant, controlling, passive-aggressive. He described a home filled with silence that felt like punishment. He used phrases like psychological coldness and emotional neglect. It felt surreal, like someone describing a man Caleb had never met. The judge finally raised a hand. Do you have evidence? He paused. Her testimony, Your Honor. Silence followed. A heavy one. Then Harper stood. Your Honor, she said, voice calm but precise. We respectfully submit documented, dated evidence contradicting these claims, including text messages, photographs, financial records, and audio clips. She handed over a series of organized folders. The judge opened the first. Over the next 40 minutes, she read in silence. Messages where Lauren laughed with Derek about Caleb's cluelessness. Bank records of covert transactions. Videos from building security showing her entering and exiting freely, smiling, chatting with neighbors. Then came the audio clip. Lauren's voice echoed in the courtroom. Caleb? He'd never do anything. He's too soft, too safe. Harper finished with a firm line. The only consistent emotion present here is not fear. It's manipulation. The courtroom fell still. The judge leaned forward, tapping her pen once against the file. There is no basis for this complaint. No protective measures will be granted. And per the prenuptial agreement, signed and notarized, there are no financial claims to resolve. This case is closed. She struck the gavel. Done. Lauren looked over, but Caleb didn't return her gaze. He wasn't looking for closure in her eyes. Closure had already arrived. He walked out of that courtroom not as a man who won, but as a man who didn't lose himself. Outside, the rain had stopped. A weak sun peeked between the clouds. Harper turned to him. She might try again. Not in court, but in other ways. Stay alert. I will, Caleb said. But she's done writing my story. That night, his phone buzzed with a message from Elise. We're all proud of you. Just thought you should know. He responded simply. Thanks. It means a lot. He didn't go out. Didn't post about the outcome. He went home, put on a mellow playlist, and sat on the balcony with a glass of cold mineral water. For the first time in months, he wasn't waiting for a fight, or a text, or an apology. He was just still. Because when someone tries to rewrite your truth with lies, survival is victory. And Caleb had survived. 2 weeks passed. No more court dates. No letters slipped under the door. No cryptic emails. The noise had finally gone quiet, not because the world changed, but because Caleb had. The false complaint had been dismissed, the asset claims rejected. And yet, the weight that Lauren once placed on his shoulders didn't vanish overnight. It lingered, like smoke after a fire, less dangerous, but still in the air. Caleb spent his days working with clients, sketching floor plans, and walking to places he used to avoid. Familiar streets felt different now, less like memories, more like chances. He even stopped by Green Hollow Park one evening just to see if it would sting. It didn't. And then came a letter, folded carefully, slid under his apartment door late at night. No envelope, no signature, but he recognized the handwriting instantly. Caleb, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just want you to understand. I was afraid of becoming invisible, afraid of being nothing. You were too kind, too good, and I didn't know how to handle that. I didn't know how to be loved without hurting someone in return. He read it standing up, motionless. He didn't cry. He didn't feel anger. He just folded the letter, placed it on the table, and walked away. Because the only thing Lauren had ever feared more than being invisible was being seen for who she really was. An hour later, another message arrived, from an unknown number, but the voice behind it was all too familiar. You think you won, but nobody sees what you did. You're not innocent, Caleb. And karma comes for everyone. It was from Derek. 2 ghosts, 1 letter, 1 threat, trying to claw their way back into a story that had already ended. Caleb didn't respond. He archived the message and sent a screenshot to Harper. Then he did something he hadn't done in months. He made himself a real dinner. Nothing fancy. Just roasted vegetables, lemon chicken, and a glass of red wine. He ate in silence. Not lonely silence, freeing silence. The next day, he met with his accountant. Together, they went over every account, every shared investment from the early years of the marriage. That's when they found it. A forgotten account in an old credit union they'd opened just in case when they first married. Small deposits had been made consistently, $200 here, $150 there. Traced back to transfers from Caleb's primary checking account, disguised as auto payments. Each deposit was then moved to a digital wallet tied to an anonymous email. But the real name behind it? Lauren Bennett. She had been planning her exit long before she ever walked out the door. Caleb didn't feel betrayed. He felt vindicated. The slow erosion of trust hadn't been his fault. It had been architecture, hers. Blueprints for a life she was building behind his back. He sent the records to Harper, who began filing a new motion, concealment of assets. It wasn't revenge. It was accountability. That night, as he sifted through paperwork in his apartment, Elise knocked. She's here, she said quietly. Downstairs. With a box. Says it's your stuff. Caleb looked up from his files. Tell her I'm not available. If she wants to speak, she can call Harper. Minutes later, a follow-up text buzzed on his phone. Just wanted to return your things. Didn't want to involve lawyers this time. Just close the loop. As two people who once mattered to each other. He didn't reply. He waited until morning to open the box. Inside, a few old letters, their first vacation photo, a worn leather watch he thought he'd lost. And at the bottom, a notebook in her handwriting. Grocery lists, notes for trips that never happened, scribbled thoughts. One page was underlined. I don't know if I love him or if I just love who he thinks I am. That was it. The final puzzle piece. She hadn't just betrayed him out of desire or boredom. She'd betrayed him because she couldn't stand the version of herself reflected in his belief. She couldn't live up to it, couldn't fake it anymore. He didn't burn the notebook. He didn't keep it either. He packed it into a storage bin marked past and slid it into the back of his closet, not to forget, but to stop carrying it. That night, he stepped out onto the balcony with his coffee and let the quiet fill the room behind him. The world was moving, and so was he. One step at a time. Caleb didn't hear from Lauren again, not that week or the one after. No more calls from attorneys. No more notes under the door. The silence wasn't just a pause, it was a full stop. And for the first time in months, Caleb stopped looking over his shoulder. The city was changing around him, too. Burlington's trees had begun to stretch into spring. Cafe patios opened, people filled the sidewalks again, and the park where Caleb once sat wondering how to keep going now invited him to simply exist. He returned to his studio one night after a walk and found himself standing in front of the closet. There was still one thing he hadn't done. The box. The last one. It held the final fragments of a life that no longer belonged to him. Birthday cards, a dried rose from an anniversary dinner, a concert ticket for a night that never happened, and a photo. The two of them, arms wrapped around each other at the edge of a coastal boardwalk, both smiling, both pretending. He stared at the picture for a long time. Not with longing, but with clarity. They didn't look unhappy, but they didn't look real either. No arguments. No betrayal. Just poses. He didn't shred the photo. Didn't light it on fire in some grand gesture. He simply tore it in half and dropped it into the recycling bin. Not to forget her, but to release himself. Because holding on to what you never really had is just another form of self-sabotage. That weekend, Caleb visited his mother in Missoula. It had been months since they'd seen each other face to face. She greeted him with a long hug, the kind that didn't ask questions, just understood the silence behind someone's eyes. You look lighter, she said, brushing the hair from his forehead. Not healed, maybe, but steadier. I'm getting there, Caleb replied. She made enchiladas with too much cheese, just the way he used to like them as a kid. After dinner, she pulled out a box of old photos and let Caleb sit with the versions of himself that had existed before Lauren. He found a photo of him at 17, holding a sketch pad, sitting under a tree. He didn't look happy. He looked hopeful. And that, Caleb realized, was worth more. Back in Burlington, the apartment felt different now. He had finally decided he wouldn't stay. That space had been built for two. And no matter how much you repaint or rearrange the furniture, the ghosts remember. He contacted a local agent, told him what he was looking for. Nothing grand, just his. Within a week, they found it. A studio with large windows, a small kitchen, and a rooftop terrace that overlooked the skyline. It was modest, clean, and quiet. Exactly what Caleb needed. He signed the lease and moved in that same month. The first night in the new place, he played soft jazz on the speaker, poured a glass of wine, and scribbled a single line into a notebook. I'm alone, but not empty. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't profound, but it was honest. He slept without waking up at 2 a.m. He didn't check his phone before bed. And in the morning, the sunlight didn't sting. A few days later, Caleb returned to a small cafe he'd walked past months ago, the same one where he'd once seen a woman reading Wendell Berry's poetry. He didn't expect anything. He wasn't looking for closure or connection. But she was there again. Same table. Same book. This time, she was writing in a journal. He hesitated only a moment before approaching. Mind if I join you? He asked. She looked up, remembered him, and smiled. Sure, she said. People who return to the same places usually have stories. And sometimes, Caleb replied, taking a seat, they're ready to start a new one. They didn't talk about scars or secrets. Just books, coffee, places neither of them had seen. When they parted, Caleb didn't ask for her number. He didn't need to. Because hope wasn't a promise. It was a direction. And Caleb had already begun walking toward it. Weeks passed. No messages. No warnings. No letters slid under the door like emotional time bombs. Lauren had disappeared from his day-to-day life, like a fog lifting slowly off a quiet lake. Caleb had settled into his new apartment, just big enough for him, a few books, and the plants that now lined the sunny windowsill. Every morning started the same way, coffee with cinnamon, music low, and the gentle peace of knowing he wasn't sharing his space with someone who resented being seen. Then one afternoon, it happened again. Elise buzzed him from the lobby. "There's something for you," she said carefully. "Left in the mailbox. No return address." Caleb knew before he even saw it. Another envelope. No name. Just folded paper, precise and careful like it came from someone who still wanted to seem put together. Inside, a single sheet. Mechanically typed. Cold. Lauren Bennett has filed a petition to review previously undisclosed marital assets. There was no legal foundation. Just noise. A tactic. She wasn't fighting for justice. She was looking for a tether, any thread that still connected them. And this was her last one. He called Harper. "She filed again," Caleb said, handing over the letter. "Expected it," Harper replied. "There's no legal weight to it, not with the documentation we already have. But it's an annoyance. She's not seeking assets. She's seeking attention. What do? We bury it. Formally. Legally. For the last time." That night, Caleb changed everything. He installed cameras in the hallway and entry, shut down every joint account that might have remained, canceled old email addresses, changed his number, even started taking different routes home. Not because he was afraid, because he was clean sweeping the past out of his life, fully, finally. Then came the call. It wasn't Lauren. It was Daniela, an old mutual friend who had tried, too long, to stay neutral. "Caleb, I wasn't sure I should call you, but she's not okay." Caleb paused. Defined not okay. "She's staying with her mother. Derek's out of the picture. She lost her job. She told me. You cut her out like she never existed." He said nothing at first. "And why are you telling me this?" he asked quietly. "I thought you should know." "Knowing doesn't mean rescuing," Caleb said. "I understand." He ended the call and stared out the window as night pressed softly against the glass. She was unraveling, but it wasn't his role to catch her anymore. He wasn't her crutch, her compass, or her mirror. He was just a man trying to heal. Later that evening, his phone buzzed again. A text. Unknown number. "Sometimes I wake up thinking nothing's changed. But then I remember, and that hurts worse. I don't dream about you anymore. And that's what scares me most. Forgive me, if there's anything left to forgive." He stared at the message for a long time, not out of confusion, but because he realized he no longer needed to answer. He didn't archive it, didn't save it. He just deleted it, not out of anger, out of release. That night, he sat alone on the balcony, a warm drink in hand. Below him, the city moved on, its lights blinking steadily, unaware of the quiet revolutions happening in one man's soul. Caleb didn't feel victorious. He felt whole. Because peace isn't loud. It's the absence of needing to explain yourself to people who never listened. The official divorce notification arrived on a Monday morning. No gavel, no courtroom, no final showdown. Just a quiet email from Harper Jennings with a subject line that read, "Resolution filed. Case closed." Caleb opened it like he would a utility bill, calm, detached. The document confirmed what his heart had already known for weeks. It was over. No more hearings. No more negotiations. No more legal tether. He stared at the screen for a moment, not feeling the wave of freedom he had once imagined. No celebration. No vindication. Just stillness. Because closure doesn't come with a bang. Sometimes, it just stops hurting. That morning, he brewed cinnamon coffee, opened every window in the apartment, and played a soft instrumental playlist on repeat. Not to mark a victory, but to welcome the absence of weight. He looked in the kitchen window, his reflection staring back. Not the man who had once stayed up late building dreams with a partner who'd already walked away inside her heart. Not the man who wondered how it fell apart. This man was different. Simpler. Clearer. Quieter. Later that day, he rode his bike across Burlington, just pedaling without aim. He passed Green Hollow Park again, that familiar backdrop of memories now worn soft by time. This time, he didn't feel haunted. He just felt present. By noon, he sat across from a potential investor at a quiet cafe, presenting plans for a sustainable design build in Tulum. He walked through schematics, budgets, timelines, steady, clear, focused. When they shook hands, the man smiled. "You've got the voice of someone who's been through fire and came out, tempered." Caleb returned the smile. "Falling's part of the deal. Getting back up, that's the design." Later, he stopped by his mother's home in Missoula. She greeted him with a smile that saw straight through to his soul. "You look lighter," she said. "Because I'm no longer carrying what isn't mine," he answered. Over coffee and her homemade bread, they spoke of the future, not once mentioning the name Lauren. Not because she was banned from the conversation, but because she no longer belonged to it. That night, back in his studio, Caleb retrieved the last box from the top shelf of the closet. Inside, the final remnants of a shared past. A few letters, a faded ticket stub, and a single photograph from a coastal trip long ago. They looked happy, but they weren't real. He didn't hesitate this time. He ripped it in two, dropped it in the trash. No ceremony, just completion. No more waiting for closure. No more trying to understand someone who didn't understand herself. As he sat on the rooftop terrace, Burlington stretching out below in soft gold and blue, Caleb wrote a simple line in his journal. "The storm didn't break me. It cleared the way." He didn't know what came next. But for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid to find out. It had been almost 2 months since Caleb last saw Lauren. No calls. No texts. No more envelopes pressed through cracks in the night. It was as if she had finally accepted that her shadow no longer stretched across his life. Caleb's days had become quieter, but not empty. Mornings filled with good coffee, work that mattered, and an apartment that now felt undeniably his. The plants by the windows had begun to bloom. So had he. Then one morning, something shifted again. It wasn't dramatic, just subtle. He woke up and realized it had been 3 days since he thought about her. Not with pain, not with nostalgia. Just not at all. It wasn't forgetting. It was freedom. Later that afternoon, he wandered through Burlington's historic district and ended up in a cafe he hadn't planned to visit. And there she was. Not Lauren. Her. The woman he had noticed before, the one who read Wendell and didn't carry storms behind her eyes. She sat 2 tables away, writing in a journal, her coffee half finished, sunlight warming her notebook. He hesitated, then walked over. "Do you mind if I sit?" She looked up, surprised, but not unkindly. "You again," she said, smiling. People who return to the same places usually bring stories. Caleb returned her smile, steadier now. And some of them are finally ready to start a new one. This time, they talked longer. About poetry. About cities they loved. About how silence didn't always have to be filled. He didn't ask for her number. Didn't rush anything. He just left with something he hadn't carried in a long time. Hope. Not for her. For himself. That evening, back in his studio, Caleb found one final note taped to the lobby door. No envelope. No name. But the handwriting he knew. "You were home to me. And now I don't know where to go. I wake up thinking it was all a bad dream. But you're gone. And that's when I know it's real. Please forgive me. Even if you never speak to me again." He read it once. Folded it in half. Walked outside. And dropped it in the corner trash bin. Not in anger. In peace. Because he no longer needed to carry ghosts that couldn't change their shape. That weekend, Caleb rode out to the edge of Lake Champlain with a sketch pad in hand. He didn't draw buildings. He didn't map the future. He just wrote one line. "I'm not rebuilding what was. I'm building what never was allowed to begin." He didn't know what story was next. But this one, his, had been written fully. Without bitterness. Without revision. And without epilogue. Because the best endings don't need punctuation. They just need to be lived.